Roll up, roll up. Welcome one, welcome all. My name is Ayman Khan. You're tuned into another edition of the Seconds Out live every Monday. No days off for myself. You'll notice a different face. You've seen him before, but it's not the face of Danny Flexen, although you might have thought that Danny might have accepted 3 wishes from a genie and asked to be 20 years younger, maybe a bit more handsome. No, this is Josh Green. Lean, mean Josh Green, I'm told. We're going to change that. How about green and gold, Josh Green? I like that one. Josh, how you doing?
Very, very well. Not Danny Flexen with a whole load of hair dye, but I am lean Josh Green back for once again myself with you, Ayman. I was on the show a couple of weeks ago with Danny, but glad to have you in the house for another week.
We are in the house indeed, and there's a lot more in this house too. It's a full house. A lot of people in the chat to discuss this week's topics. We'll get to all of those chats as well there in the comment section. So if you haven't already, hit the like button, subscribe, and get your comments in on the topics that we're going to be discussing this week. A lot to discuss and looking forward to in terms of this week's action. This week's action includes Conor Benn over in Las Vegas against Pete Dobson, as well as at home. A much anticipated rivalry is ended this weekend. Joshua Buatsi and Azeez go toe-to-toe. We'll see who comes out the victor in that one. So once again, get your comments in the chat and we'll read them out. And starting off with the heavyweights, the heavy hitters, what everyone wants to see, what everyone wants to talk about, what everyone wants to tune into very, very soon, happening over in Saudi Arabia. We love it in the UK, but Saudi Arabia, it's happening for now. Joshua versus Ngannou and Fury versus Usyk comes up to us on our TV screens. And we'll start off with Joshua versus Ngannou because there stands to be a lot of stakes in that fight. Not just the undisputed being on the line for Fury versus Usyk, but the winner of Joshua versus Ngannou stands to be in the frame for the next bite at the cherry for the undisputed crown should the IBF stay in this position and not be vacated. Either way, 3 belts might end up being on the line there for the winner of that fight. In terms of that, though, Josh, how do you feel about the winner of Joshua versus Ngannou getting that bite at the cherry when others in the division, like a Zhang, like a Parker, who defeated Deontay Wilder in surprising fashion, might have strong claims to getting that opportunity?
Yeah, I think you have to look at the short run, and someone like a Joseph Parker after beating Deontay Wilder, if he was to go on and beat Zhilei Zhang, he'd have a very, very strong claim. You have to look at the short run of fights that they've had over the last year or so and what Joshua's done over the last year. You look at Helenius, you look at Volin, and you look at possibly a win against Ngannou. Is that really the pedigree that gets you to an undisputed title? Probably have to say no, but from a fan's point of view, it's something that you certainly shouldn't be complaining about Joshua against Fury as an undisputed fight. So there's a few ways of looking at that one. Would he deserve it on the run? Possibly not, but am I going to complain? No.
And boxing fans might complain even more so if the impossible, in brackets, maybe not so impossible happens. That was what Dewey Cooper and co will be planning for Francis Ngannou to shock the world again, but this time get his hand raised against Anthony Joshua. Can't write out Francis Ngannou's chances just yet because of what's been able to achieve. Then Francis Ngannou, who's a 1-on-1 fighter, getting a crack at either Fury or Usyk. The world, or at least the boxing world, the sporting world, we're tuning in, but maybe not for someone who's quite as deserving as the others that are in the queue to hold on to that kind of opportunity. Let's get to your thoughts in the chat, though, and see what you guys think about this situation, as well as chopping up who you think will win the fight, starting off with Joshua versus Ngannou. So we've got some comments in the chat. First of all, we have William Machiria. Might butcher these names a little bit. Normally, Danny gets the names right. He butchers them, and I get to laugh. Josh gets the seat of laughing this time around. But William is saying AJ is all the best, so therefore he's going for the pick that Anthony Joshua will beat Francis Ngannou. We'll remain to see if that happens. We have here, I'm going to have to read this one carefully, Nadaf Wepa Mabango saying Ngannou takes the lead if Anthony is not setting his foot away from the ranks. Then we have here a bit of joke comment. We know Reminding Mode likes to put a few joke comments in. He says, Prince Nassim will jump in the ring and KO Anthony Joshua. I think Nassim Hamid's days of getting in between the ropes are done and gone, unless he's helping his sons in their professional careers. Michael says Ngannou will win because AJ can't take a smack in the face. Look at the first Ruiz fight. Then he ran all night in the rematch because he was scared to bang it out with him. Josh, let's discuss this one a little bit here because people put a big question mark about AJ's chin. Francis Ngannou questioned on Errol Hawani's podcast whether his chin was sturdy enough to take it. People say there's been a difference in Joshua since he took those big shots from Ruiz, since that surprising night happened, since Andy Ruiz was able to rip up the script and knock down Joshua, discombobulate him. People say that now that Joe Gallagher said it on Seconds Out as well too. Now when he gets hit, he stays hit. He can't recover, and he's got to change his game plan. He's got to change the way he fights to make sure he doesn't get hit. He doesn't stay hit. Do you see that in Joshua? Do you think he's a different fighter because of that?
I do think he's a different fighter to 2 or 3 years ago. And it's interesting what you mentioned there about the chance that Ngannou would have against Joshua. I remember being on the show 2 weeks ago and we put out a poll of who do you think's going to win between Anthony Joshua and Francis Ngannou, and 35% of people actually said that Francis Ngannou was going to win that fight. Now that was hugely surprising for me. I do give Francis Ngannou a limited chance of winning that fight, but I did not expect to see 35% of people thinking that. But in terms of where he is in his career, yeah, I do think he's a bit of a different fighter to what he was a few years ago. But with the work he's doing now, and obviously we've seen he's gone through a bunch of trainers as of late, but he seems to be making some progress with Ben Davison. And yeah, I do hope that some of those bad times are behind him and we can see that best Anthony Joshua once again.
We have Reminding Mode in the chat saying he's talking tactics, and he's saying, I want Ngannou to win, but he needs to be up close to get the victory. And we've seen that big, long wingspan that Ngannou has, that one of the big assets to his physicality, not that he's just a bigger guy out of Fury and Joshua, which he will be in this fight, but he's also massive. The amount of space he's able to occupy because of how long his arms are is a real key factor in this fight, and Joshua has to find a way around that. And he might find himself in the end of a few stiff jabs in getting to Ngannou in the first place. Mr. Nice 420 says he didn't realize how close the fight was. It's very close indeed. As does another one, Lanky Streak says the same sort of thing too. Paul Owen is backing his man, the Gypsy King, says he will be the last man standing. We'll get to that in a moment. Gaboncho TV says he's backing his vote for anti-Joshua. Mr. Nice wants the best man to win, although he's a Fury fan. Reminding Mode says anti-Joshua does have a chin. I'm inclined to believe so too, but can he take the whack of Francis Ngannou? That's another question that has to be answered. There's a lot of talk about Francis Ngannou and him having the power of the punch over the two. That might be the truth from the single punch, or about the combinations. AJ is known for his devastating combinations. Can he get those off? And in those combinations, will he be more powerful than Francis? I don't know how to pronounce that one, but it ends in Scott. It says, who's better, Bruce or Michael Buffer? We'll leave the announcer chat for another time. Did you see how he got up from Klitschko? Rocket of a right hand. He did get up from that shot from Klitschko. That was also when he was fatigued after a big barrage from the south. He hurt Klitschko too. A number of years ago as well, Joshua's since taken a bit of punishment too. Like the Thomas Hauser identified in my interviews, that punishment that Joshua has taken. I've seen the punishment he's taken. I want to see Joshua step away in fights where there's jeopardy like this, like in a Wilder fight, like in a Ngannou fight, where potentially get hurt in the ring with those big power punches, but he seems to have recovered and is on a new path towards undisputed. When's Fury fight, Mr. Nice says? Very, very soon it is. It's going to be crazy like crazy. The whole situation is crazy. How did an MMA fighter end up in the top tier heavyweight boxing discussion? That is just a little land of boxing right now. With everything going on, we don't quite know what direction things are going in. That's the craziness about it. It could be that Francis Ngannou comes away with a fight winner. Very, very crazy possibility. And it would change the landscape if it does go down. Ngannou, I think, will get the knockout. AJ's the better boxer. What does that say then? When the better boxer gets knocked out, what are we saying? What are we saying about the MMA fighter who comes in and beats top? For some, anyway. Only reason Francis is because Fury couldn't do the job properly since the line. People's all up for Fury. Francis and Fury has a belt, but AJ's getting S for it, and he ain't gonna get a strap for the better. I think I've mixed it up a little bit, but I appreciate the comment nonetheless. Apparently, Fury has a better chin, but been down more times than AJ. Good point here. And got dropped by a cruiserweight. AJ ain't never been dropped by a cruiserweight. That's a fair point there too. But then again, if you look at what Oleksandr Usyk had done in those 2 fights against Joshua, that's a cruiserweight coming up to heavyweight, not quite fully established himself at the top level. He was in at the top level against Joshua, and he was able to really hurt Joshua and could have, if he stepped on the gas a little bit more, get Joshua out there. It looked like at some points, especially later in the first fight, that he was about to be out there, but didn't quite get it. Did Tyson land anything big on Francis? I know they're used to head kicks, but taking a power punch from a large heavyweight he's trained to punch specifically. No, that's a good point as well too. A lot to talk, a lot of comments. I'm going to park the comments there for the moment and switch the perspective to Fury versus Usyk. And we had a conversation with James Ali Bashir, former coach of Oleksandr Usyk, spent a lot of time with Oleksandr Usyk, maybe one of the men that knows Oleksandr Usyk the most and the best outside of his current training team. James said a couple of things that had struck some resonance with myself. One being, both of these are master of the mind games. Fury's done his mind games over the years with the Batman costumes, with staying in the saunas for the Klitschko fight. Oleksandr Usyk, king of mind games, but in his own way. We saw him also don a costume, the Joker costume. Who are rivals? Who are nemesis? Batman and Batman and the Joker. Messed that one up a little bit there, that transition. But James, when I asked him, I said, who's going to be able to infiltrate the other person's mind? And he said, Fury can't get into Usyk's mind. Usyk can and will get into Fury's mind, to paraphrase him. Now, the mentality battle is a thing that entertains us outside the ring, but will it pay dividends in the ring, Josh, do you feel?
I think those press conferences are going to be very, very interesting for us to watch in Fury Usyk fight week. And from what we've seen from Usyk in previous fight weeks is very calm demeanor. He doesn't give a huge amount away on fight week, and he stays in that place right up until fight night. You don't really know what Tyson Fury is going to turn up. He's got a whole host of different demeanors that we could see from him. I think I know which one I expect to see on that fight week, but will it affect Oleksandr Usyk, in particular, whether that's going to pay dividends? I think frustration is something that could to the mind of Tyson Fury if he doesn't have any success early in that fight, and maybe, just maybe, the mindset will play a part in that.
How about the actual fight and how the fight plays out? In another interview, I was able to speak to Jermaine Franklin, and Jermaine had sparred Tyson Fury heading into the fight with Dylan White. So Fury had brought him into the camps to maybe thought that the size and the way that they fought was similar. And Jermaine spoke to me and he said that Fury was very, and I've heard this from a couple of people, they said that Fury was very good on the inside, surprisingly good on the inside. Not only does he use his size to great effect in bearing down as an opponent, and your opponent's got to understand that you can't push him back because you're going to tire yourself out, but does Usyk, in turn, actually have the advantage in the clinches because Usyk specifically trains for wrestling and clinches, and I know that Joshua, in preparation for his camps against Usyk, brought in specifically like wrestling, grappling coaches so he could combat that on the inside. Do you feel in those moments that Usyk might have the edge over Fury? And then overall, Josh, how do you feel the fight plays out? Who are you hanging your hat on to win that fight?
Oh, it's a hard one to call, isn't it, Ayman? I mean, everybody's going to have a different opinion. I wouldn't be surprised if my opinion changes a number of times over the next few weeks. I mean, looking at it now, I would probably favour Fury. I mean, size plays a huge part in these heavyweight fights, and that is obviously going to be an advantage in the Fury corner. But I wouldn't be surprised in any way at all to see Usyk come away with the victory, and I think that's something that we will find more about in the next few weeks, how they are getting on in camp. We'll see them in the press conference on weigh-in day, and I think it's going to be a hugely competitive fight. And the clamour for this has really been huge over the last few months, and it's one I'm really looking forward to. I know a lot of the fans in the comments are looking forward to as well. And you just look over social media, it's something that everybody can't wait to see.
In the comment section, Zabana Love says, would it be beneath Fury to bring up Ukraine-Russia war to get into Usyk's head, or is nothing beneath Fury? I think they say all's fair in love and war. However, I think the Saudis are keen to stay away from the political conversation. And I think if Fury was to ever think about that, not that I believe he would, but if it was to ever come up in consciousness, I think the Saudis would want to not put that out. I think they want politics away from this, and they want to just concentrate on the undisputed fight itself, although the politics side of it does bear some merit, but that's a conversation for another day. Scott says the signs are there. The training talk, he's putting in 4 weeks. The signs are there for Fury's loss. I said it first. We'll note that down. We'll see if you said it here first. I'll check that as well too. But there's a Fury loss backer there in the chat. So many people, this is Tony Lyons, saying that they slate AJ, yet he's the one who took the bigger fights. Otto was apparently a dangerous fight because he took Fury 12 rounds. AJ makes him quit in the 5th, but then doesn't get the credit people hate. I agree with that. Maybe just as much as sometimes AJ gets the conversation surrounding him for whatever he does, whatever comes out of his mouth, he deserves the credit as well due to him. And like you said there, that is what happened. Like it wasn't quite life and death, but on another night, on another referee, that fight might have got stopped between Tyson Fury and Otto Wallin. And look how AJ was able to dispatch of Otto Wallin. Now, there was a number of years that had gone past as well, too. But you can only judge on what happened in the ring, and that's what did happen in the ring. Michael saying Usyk has a body weakness. He's been dropped 5 times in his career with body shots. Beterbiev dropped him. Josh, quickly coming back to you. These body shots, have you seen that as a weakness there? We know that Dubois hit him with a shot, controversially low or not low. But do you feel it's a target zone for Fury if he wants to get the victory?
I think it probably will be a target zone for Fury. I think there's a difference in it being a target zone and being a weakness for Oleksandr Usyk. Maybe you may edge towards it being a slight weakness for him, but is it one that can really turn the tide of the fight? I'm not 100% sure on that. I think there are a few other things that probably come to mind that would turn the tide a little bit more than the weakness and tendency with those body shots. But we did see in that Daniel Dubois fight, whether you think it's a low blow or not, he needed that time to recover on that occasion. And if Fury's going to hit him with a shot similarly to what Dubois did, then that could be game over, couldn't it? Really, for Usyk.
Could be game over indeed. I would imagine that they've looked to target the body, having seen him in various ways go down or need time from a body shot. There's no other glaring weakness at the top, or at least the chess match, the mind games, the ability to bluff is there at the top when he gets hit up to the top there. But to the body, it shows and tells, and it has done in the past, so it might be somewhere that they're looking to hit and hurt. Ramoni Guard says that Beterbiev dropped him 3 times to the body in the amateurs, yes. Michael saying he has a major body weakness and Fury will exploit it. Usyk is 221 pounds. Fury is 271 pounds. It's over. Jeffrey Hunt says, I just agree. Tony's saying if Fury fights someone and goes life and death, it's because he didn't show up, but not because the other fighter did good and was just better. AJ's a hard night. It's because he's rubbish. Some people jokes. Zumbano Love jumping in and saying, think Fury being decent southpaw with his size will cause Usyk issues, southpaw and orthodox stances. You won't have that easy exit to the right. He has with most orthodox fighters with slower feet and less reach. Can't hit what you can't see is the old phrase. Usyk can't even switch from southpaw, Michael says. Joshua still wearing a sombrero and singing the Ukrainian anthem. That's from Jay Sharp. Ngannou was 280 pounds, so Fury couldn't ragdoll him. But Usyk is 221 pounds. A jab will snap his head back. Sabano Love again. Usyk moves almost constantly and so is susceptible to getting winded by well-timed body shots. Lanky Streak of Piss, what a name. Don't like AJ, and he's a media fake, although he's now being the real AJ. But with Fury's old trainer, he's right back in the fold. That's Ben Davison, and he's got the potential to be world champion. So nice, he had to do it thrice. Can he get there? Can he be undisputed? Ben Newman jumping in. Ben Newman, good to see you. Mike Tyson training Francis Ngannou shows how there could be a few factors in the fight. I don't know how involved Mike is in the camp, whether it's tactics, whether it's a few training sessions, where maybe it's just an inspirational kind of role for him. But it's Dewey Cooper and Eric Nixick who are the two main coaches. Dewey Cooper does the striking. Eric Nixick is more of the grappling and does more of the MMA side. So Dewey takes the lead on the striking side when it comes to boxing. Maybe Mike puts in his input. Maybe that's something I should ask Dewey Cooper when I next speak to him about his input in training for this fight moving forward against Anthony Joshua. But we will park the AJ. Actually, we won't park it for just the moment. Let's hang our hats quickly here, Josh. And I know our opinions are going to probably change as we move forward, but I'll hang my hat as well too on where I stand right now. I'm going to say in the heavyweight picture between Joshua Ngannou and Fury Usyk that Joshua will win against Ngannou on points, and Usyk will win against Fury on points, meaning that we could see a picture of Usyk Joshua 3 later this year or into early next year. Where are you hanging your hat? Let's push you for a prediction.
Just for a second, I thought we were going to agree there, Ayman, but no, I'm going to go Joshua on points, the same as you, but I'm going to back Fury to get the win on the other side of the heavyweight division, and we finally, maybe anyway, get that Fury-Joshua fight.
We'll park that there for now and move on to the action over the weekend over in America. A British fight favorite in the form of John Ryder took on Jaime Munguia in what was to be billed as maybe a test for Jaime Munguia, an even fight, a good fight where John Ryder had successes and avenues to victory against Jaime Munguia. But it didn't turn out that way for John, who unfortunately was on the end of a defeat. And it was a harsh, well, I suppose you kind of look at it different ways, but in this form, Jaime Munguia was able to get the job done from his perspective and stop John Ryder, where Canelo wasn't able to do that job when they fought against John himself. But what did you feel about seeing that fight, and what do you feel is next for John, Josh?
It's a tough one for John Ryder now, isn't it? He's got a number of defeats on the record, and a few of those have come quite lately, and it was a tough one to take, I think, for John Ryder. He was obviously knocked down those 4 times. He took quite a lot of punishment in that fight, and against someone like Munguia, who's a terrific fighter, and I think he's proved himself there to be a decent puncher as well. You have to feel that there is there another step down that John Ryder's going to want to take? The fights would definitely be there if he wants to take them, but I think it's a case of, does he sort of call it a day with the boxing, or does he want to become more of a gatekeeper for that world sort of level? You can look down at the likes of Berlanga if he maybe comes past McCrory, or even someone like a Diego Pacheco, and then there's options for him at that level, but it's whether he's got the motivation and the desire, and whether he needs to fight at that level. And in my opinion, I don't think he does need to fight there. It's just whether the desire is there for me.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I just kind of add there. I mean, it's a small bit of a shame in a sense to not see John lift one of the titles, because John, I believe, has the ability, or showed the ability, that he's capable of warranting and deserving a title around his waist, especially the way the Callum Smith fight went. For a lot of people, he won that fight. For a lot of people, he was robbed. And for a lot of people, that ignited, a lot of goodwill towards John, who'd done it the hard way, was never favored by any promoter, was never seen as the top of the mantle, the main event by many in the boxing business, was able to carve his own niche, was able to carve his own route to success. And I think success for probably him is, getting monetary gain out of boxing, getting those financial rewards and having those big fights and challenging himself. He was always known, John, I'm writing the obit for him now in his career, but he's still known, I should say. He's not retired just yet. But John was known by sparring partners as, they called him the Bar, because if you could spar with John, then you knew you were at a certain level. But that was what John was. John was the test, the barometer to know where you are. And John was able from there to have his successes. The Callum Smith fight, people thought he won. Then Danny Jacobs, razor close fight. He got the nod. Maybe he, got that nod on that night as a little. It shouldn't work that way, but he got one on his side. Then he goes in to get he defeats Zach Parker. Then he goes in to maneuver himself into position to get the Canelo fight, and that's his reward there. You didn't win a world title, couldn't get that opportunity, but you've got the Canelo fight, which is the riches, the other side of it. So you might be content at that. Maybe he wants to try and position himself for a title. That's a tougher road back. You're gonna have to step down quite a bit to build yourself back up to that level. But then there's also maybe potentially having a representation on the 5 versus 5. John being a Matchroom fighter for quite a while now in the Tony Sims gym as well, the Matchroom gym too. Will he take part in that? Could he take part in that? But otherwise, you mentioned David Pacheco, Edgar Berlanga, 2 fighters are on the rise. And like you said there, does he want to be a gatekeeper for that? Maybe he might take one last payday and then sail off into the sunset. Either way, he's had a good career where hopefully he can pull out those financial rewards and make more of that as he looks to move forward in life. People in the chat are saying here about John Ryder, if I pull that up just quickly, Ramoni Mode is saying, I think John said if he loses, then he'll retire. That'll be him done then, if Ramoni's right. Said that Ryder was too slow, too old, and there's a lot of wear and tear. Munguia put on tons of volume and was one I kind of thought I agree with you. No volume from Ryder whatsoever for some reason. That might be the age, that might be the wear and tear that we're referring to. Callum could probably fight for the title after being racing stopped, whilst Ryder is now probably done at world level. Sport is too unfair. It is at times, that's for sure. Michael said, Ryder didn't look right to me. He was too cautious and barely thrown a big left hand. There might have been something up with Ryder. I don't know that to be the case, but these things sort of filter out in the weeks and months after the fight as to whether there was an injury, an illness. Can't say I knew of one, but there could have been that hampered his performance. Or maybe it was, like we mentioned, the wear and tear. Maybe it was a Canelo fight. Tough, bruising affair. How much did it take out of an older Ryder? There's not always one answer to who would win, because sometimes they can draw as well too. Hipster pick the draw. I like to pick the draw sometimes myself too, Ben. And sometimes any of them could win. Likely that they can get a different winner every match. Ryder seems aware he was the tune-up / filler. Maybe, but maybe he's just happy to get that financial reward as well too. Never said it was wrong for him to retire. Just said that he was earlier in the week. People are going off in the chat, having a bit of... Let's calm it down. We keep the fights in the ring, not in the chat. Soon me and Josh will be kicking lumps out of each other if it keeps getting this spicy in the chat. But yeah, let's keep it between the ropes. But David Benavidez watched the fight, and David Benavidez made some comments after the fight saying he'd knock out Jaime Munguia, be an easy win for him. Took some slack off of that off of social media. When you put that on social media, people naturally respond. But Munguia wants to fight with Canelo. Benavidez wants to fight with Canelo. Munguia thinks he'll beat Benavidez. Benavidez will think he'll beat Munguia. But it's Canelo, the pound king for many right now. Is he, for you, better than these two? With some people feeling that Canelo's a bit on the slide. Are these two hungry young fighters who want that mantle, who want that crown that Canelo's got? Do they stand to be a test for Canelo, Josh?
Are they a test? Yeah, I think it's fair to call them a test, but I certainly wouldn't be backing them in any way against Canelo, because I think there is still a fair bit of a gap between those guys you mentioned, Benavidez and Munguia and Canelo. He may be nearer the end of his career than he is the start, but I think he is still a pound for pound top star, an incredible boxer, and I don't think there's anybody in that division in particular that can beat him. I think Munguia and Benavidez, to be fair, would give him some sort of test. I think they would be interesting fights, but do they beat him? No, not in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, I think for me, Munguia's resume at the higher levels kind of is a bit more lacking. I think he probably needs another win there. Benavidez's recent victories stand a bit more test of time, especially the fights against kind of Plant, the fights against Andre, those type of names that feature on Benavidez's resume really kind of put him into position to fight the likes of Canelo Alvarez. And I think it's time really now. I know that it's somewhat disappointing that Canelo Alvarez will be taking on Jamal Charlo. You want to see him take on what appeared to be, in the current perspective, the better test, and I feel it as well too, the better test. And the affair of the same nation, two fighters from similar backgrounds fighting off together on Cinco de Mayo really obviously adds an extra flavor to the dynamic of the fight too, which, Munguia is throwing punches and punches and punches, exciting style. Benavidez the same, come forward, exciting style. Real problems that can be caused to Canelo. It's just whether Canelo feels that, one, he wants to take the fight. Two, it does anything more for his resume. Three, is he locked into those fights already? Have these been previously agreed beforehand? Has the Amazon deal changed the perspective of PBC and what they want to offer and what they want to hold back for now at the moment? But you feel that maybe those are missed opportunities with the likes of Benavidez and Munguia on Cinco de Mayo, but maybe they were locked in beforehand. But we'll remain to see what happens with that going forward. And we'll move forward to this weekend as two fighters, two rivals, two fighters who have shared numerous rounds in sparring now go toe-to-toe against each other this weekend in London. Joshua Buatsi, good friends, better enemies, good title from Danny Flexen, teeing it up quite nicely. Buatsi and Azeez this weekend. Joshua Buatsi getting back now on a run, keeping the wheels in motion for the fight, but Dan Azeez has been much more active and has the momentum gained in his career. People really liking the ascent of Dan Azeez, and he's got the British favour in terms of wanting to see him succeed, as does Joshua Buatsi. But with Dan Azeez out of sight and out of mind, Joshua Buatsi has been for a while. Azeez has been able to take some of that spotlight in the light heavyweight division amongst the other light heavyweights too, and really kind of get their eye on him from the British public perspective. Do you feel that Azeez can get the victory this weekend over Buatsi? Do you feel the momentum? Do you feel that the activity is going to be the thing that takes him through with a victory, Josh?
Activity is going to be a big factor, yeah, for Dan Azeez. I've watched his rise very carefully. I've been fortunate to be a number of Dan Azeez's fights. One that particularly sticks out was when he was over in Paris and he went into the Lion's Den, and as he came out from his ring walk, he was booed by the French crowd, but after a dominating victory over his French opponent Thomas Four, he was applauded on the decision, and I think what he's done over the last couple of years has been pretty incredible. Really, he seems to be just going from level to level without really having any hiccups, and he's got to this level now where he's facing Joshua Buatsi, having not really had a particularly sticky moment for quite a while now. And that momentum is a big factor in these fights where they could go either way. The bookies actually have Dan Azeez as around a 3-1 outsider, which I was a little surprised at, to be honest. Just looking at the activity that they both had, looking at some of the names that Azeez has managed to share the ring with, and comparing it to the names that Joshua Buatsi's shared the ring with, I was very surprised to see Azeez as a 3-1 outsider, especially with the momentum that he's managed to gain. And he's definitely a game opponent, and in my opinion, he's got a really good chance of winning that.
I think the rise of Dan Azeez has shown. I know that boxer are getting a lot of stick right now. We'll park that chat for the moment, but it shows what good credit boxers have been able to do with fighters like the likes of Buatsi, like the likes of Dan Azeez, like the likes of Tyler Denny, Azeem to a different degree. But these sort of unheralded fighters, you give them the opportunity, you give them the spotlight, you give them chances, and they take them. And then you give them another one, and they take them, and then you ride with them. And they've been able to do that in absence of other fighters like Buatsi, who's not had that level of activity. So he can be really heralded to have been given that opportunity and then taken it and thrust himself forward. My issue with this fight specifically is I think the levels might show here in favor of Joshua Buatsi. I think that when you look at the records of Dan Azeez, I think Buatsi has been in much tougher opposition. I think Buatsi has faced the likes and styles of Azeez, not only in sparring, but also in the ring as well, in other opposition. I always kind of reflect back to, and Joshua Buatsi has had some dud fights, especially like Daniel Blender dos Santos, terrible fight, no need for Blender Dos Santos to be in the ring with Joshua Buatsi at all. Just a waste in time of a fight now. But he seems to be moving forward. But I always remember the fight with Marco Kalic where we were kind of looking to see Joshua Buatsi come through that test, that bit of adversity. Can he come through it? When the going gets tough, will he get going? And that going really did get tough when was marked into the eye was closing, he was getting hit loads, we were seeing the lack of defense, we were seeing the need for improvement, but he was still able to pull out the irons from the fight and get the victory there in an exciting fashion and end the fight with Marco Kalic early. And I think that seeing that for myself, seeing that with my own eyes, that gives me the confidence that what Azeez will bring, Joshua Buatsi will be able to match and then overwhelm Azeez with. I think this will be a good fight for the first 6 rounds, and I see Buatsi taking over the fight there. Might not get the stoppage, but it's on the table. But Buatsi, for me, gets his hand raised there too. We've also got to ask as well whether it's been difficult to get the training in regards to Callum Smith fighting Artur Beterbiev over in Canada. Overlapping camps there. Has Buddy been able to successfully divvy up his time so that Callum Smith is getting his opportunity to train for Beterbiev, but not undermining Azeez's fight against Buatsi and the importance of that one? Is that been cohesive in getting that plan? Has it meant that someone has had to sacrifice a little bit in their prospective fights where they need that time with the trainer? How have they been able to manage that? And will it be a factor in the fight which leads to the detriment of one of the fighters? But that's something that we'll find out in the aftermath of it. Get into some of the comments in the chat here about the fights. First of all, just slightly moving backwards, and Marlon Love asking, can you ask Eddie why Conor is fighting in Vegas, small hall at midday? If he's not banned here, why is his last fights 2 being abroad against unknown foreigners? I think in the first off, if I am still live, can you hear me? Can you see me? Yeah, I'm still here. Good. I think my pictures are frozen, that's all. I think it's a site fee, first of all, which is why they're doing these fights over in Vegas. And also, I think there's a ongoing issue regarding, which will be determined very soon. There's a meeting happening with the British Boxing Board of Control regarding the appeal. I think maybe they want to keep themselves away from that for the moment, even though they feel that they can take the avenue to fight over in the UK. Might just be looking to avoid that for the moment. But if you get a site fee, even better. You get paid to play, essentially. Moving forward, Ben wants the big fights, but they are rightfully not accepting. Is Morel a name for Benavidez? Morel will think so. Benavidez might not. He's not at world level and no reason to accept him as a fight. Haney seems interested in Ben, though, at 147. Eddie says, I don't think so. I'm not sure about that one. Eddie was saying how much money they were losing with Buatsi, but they are suing Sky for $7 million for breaching contract. Was Buatsi worth that much money to them? Good question. One to potentially ask Eddie this weekend. Would he have been even better at boxing if Mike Tyson didn't smoke weed? Leave that one for another day. I see AJ fight being really close, whereas I see Usyk trying really hard on Fury, but the Gypsy King will, however, overcome all the hard work from Usyk and be victorious. Those are the comments in the chat for now. But yeah, Buatsi, Azeez. Do you feel that the winner, either or, Josh, will be able to thrust one of the light heavyweight kings out of their crowns? Artur Beterbiev defeated Callum Smith in exciting fashion. Dimitri Bivol defeated Lyndon King Arthur, king of his own, over in Saudi Arabia. 2 real big heavy hitters in their own ways. 2 undefeated fighters. 2 puzzles that present themselves to solve for the winner if they can maneuver themselves into that position. Do you feel that either Buatsi or Azeez have anything for either of those 2?
Yeah, I think it's really a tough challenge for anybody in the world divisions to beat Bivol or Beterbiev. I think they're right at the top of their game, and there's some great challenges over in this country. We've seen Anthony Yarde have a really good go. Callum Smith, of course, went over there a couple of weeks ago, and they've put in valiant efforts, especially Anthony Yarde, who I was really impressed with on the night there. And the light heavyweight division over here in the UK is really thriving at the moment. And whoever wins between Dan Azeez and Joshua Buatsi will rightly have an opportunity and be thrust into that sort of picture. And whoever they end up meeting, it'll be a fight that definitely gets a lot of interest over here. But do I see either of them having the skill and having the ability to overturn a Beterbiev or a Bivol? Not really. It's a tough challenge. We've seen. I think when Callum Smith went into the fight against Beterbiev, there were people really giving Callum Smith a chance in that fight, and the age of Beterbiev was being questioned, but he's answered those questions very, very strongly, and I think he's put those to bed. So if they were to face Beterbiev, I think that's a tough challenge. Bivol, very similarly, it's just so hard stepping into the ring with those guys. It would be a terrific opportunity for Buatsi and Azeez, but a tough challenge for sure.
Tough challenge indeed. We'll see who wins this weekend. A lot in the offing, a lot on the line, but a good light heavyweight fight nonetheless on that card featured between Joshua Buatsi and Dan Azeez. Just get to some of the comments here. Turkey said he wants the winner of AJ Ngannou to fight Fury Usyk winner, but in Fury Usyk face to face, it seems Fury isn't interested and is done after Usyk. We've seen Fury come up with a lot of rhetoric about being retired, what he wants, who he doesn't want to fight, who he does want to fight. Tyson Fury, I think, knows how to play the game in terms of the press and get his name out there and keep people talking about Tyson Fury. And I think that's just another bit of not quite gamesmanship, but just a way for him to completely focus on Oleksandr Usyk at present. And to be fair, I remember the comment he said. He essentially disregarded Joshua as a potential opponent and Wilder being a potential opponent for Usyk because he's beaten Wilder twice, who's in the picture, and Usyk's been Joshua twice. So if you kind of look at like a bit of a square theory between the four of them, him beating Usyk means that he would beat Joshua. That sort of kind of thinking is going in the mind of Tyson Fury. But truth of the matter is, there will be a lot of British interest, and I think maybe even more in the worldwide sense, American interest. There always is with heavyweights anyway. They understand the scale of that fight between between Tyson Fury and Joshua. Give Tyson Fury the credit as the champion, but that's a fight that people have been clamoring for a long time, especially with the likes of the Wilder AJ fight having fallen by the wayside, which was a fight people wanted to see for a long, long time and had apparently been close on numerous occasions. We were supposed to get that fight again if Wilder had come through the fight against Joe Parker. Joe Parker, the best spoiler of plans in recent months. We were supposed to get that fight. That fight's gone now. So it really kind of puts the scope on Fury versus Joshua, because we don't want a big fight of that magnitude falling by the wayside again. A lot of money to be made for promoters as well, too. We don't want that to fall by the wayside either. Moving forward, someone said they score 3-minute rounds as 3 individual minutes. Could scoring be changed to reflect how many minutes of round you won? So 3 points if you win all 3, and 2 for closely won rounds. I think people have put in lots of different theories on how they can improve scoring. I'm not really set on any kind of improvement that I've heard, to be fair. I've heard people kind of say maybe they should put the judges in soundproof boxes so they're not swayed by the crowd or not swayed by the the trainers who are hooping and hollering, for every arm shot and saying it's a punch. I've seen a lot of people say that the judges should only look at the cameras, but then the cameras can present whatever, or be isolated. I kind of feel like I've not really heard anything to say any different to that's really kind of draw me into changing the judging system. But I do believe that there probably is a way. So I can't think of anything to the top of my head. Josh, can you think of anything what about this way of changing the minutes? How many minutes you've won in the round as opposed to how many rounds you've won?
Yeah, I'm not sure I caught all of that, Ayman. I think you're asking me about the differences, the changing of scoring, and
yeah,
there's a lot of ways of looking at it. I've seen a lot of theories out there, and I think it's hard to find a theory that's completely bulletproof. I think what we've got at the moment is close to that. Sometimes it's the implementation that we get wrong. So yeah, you see things about scoring minutes or whether you're scoring a round or looking more towards the statistical side of it, there's a lot of different ways of looking at it. You can also look at the style and things like that. So there's a lot of different ways of scoring a fight, and that's why it eventually comes down to opinion, I guess. And that's why people aren't always going to agree on scoring. Of course, there's been a lot of scorecards of late that people haven't agreed with, and that's going to happen. I think boxing in general does need to tighten up on that. But in terms of a huge overhaul of the scoring system, I think that's something that's not going to happen anytime soon.
Fair enough. You should do a poll on fighters and ask. I don't think anyone cares about Buatsi and Azeez. I think people do care, especially in this country, about Buatsi and Azeez. Two good fighters who put it on the line. I think it's going to be an exciting fight for as long as it lasts. While the gimmick complaining about Charles Manson dancing his way to the ring, victory is over now. Power punch should be worth 2 points and jabs 1. They're all discussing the machinations of the potential scoring. Let's move on to the machinations of. I'll be over in Vegas, looking forward to it. Conor Benn taking on Peter Dobson in the ring. Now, there is a bit of a disconnect when it comes to what Conor Benn is calling for in terms of opposition, and then the opposition that is there. We have to give the credit to Pete Dobson, who is 16-0. I believe that his record in terms of him being inactive, it shows on Boxrec and other sources that his last fight was in 2022. That's not quite the case. Pete Dobson, I believe, has been in the Team Combat League. If you don't know what that is, it's a league type of format in America where you have a team, sort of like the Premier League, Arsenal, Manchester United, whatever. Well, you have Las Vegas, you have New York, you have whatever other state, and they all have fighters within their team, and each fighter will fight one round against another fighter from another team, and it's 3 minutes, and whoever wins the round wins 3 points for their team, and it's a league system to get that team to rise to the top and win the season overall. That sort of format, and Pete Dobson has been fighting in that format. I believe he's 2-7 in that format as well. I have to double check that. I believe that to be the case, and that's a little bit concerning as well. Too, in a one-round format, you've not been as successful as maybe you'd want to be, and maybe that's a kind of a bit of an avenue for Conor Benn to look at in those early rounds. Maybe Pete Dobson doesn't start or doesn't push as much as he should do, but he's not as inactive as potentially his record does suggest. But it is also an opponent that maybe that fight fans weren't expecting when Conor Benn calls the likes of Jaron Ennis out and other fighters out for fights. We see different opposition in the opposite corner. Does the Conor Benn fight against Pete Dobson particularly excite you, Josh?
I didn't quite hear what you had to say, Ayman, there, but I mean, Dobson is a fighter that I didn't have too much of a clue about before he was sort of matched up against Conor Benn, and I know Conor was calling for the names like Jaron Ennis and obviously Chris Eubank Jr. as well, and I think he will be a little disappointed in some ways that this is the fight that has fallen to him, and I think that's probably a feeling that's shared with boxing fans, probably the media, and probably in some ways the promoters themselves. They would have hoped that we could get a little bit of more of a name in the opposite corner to Conor Benn, but it is Dobson, and he will present some challenges. But what are we going to learn from this fight if Conor Benn wins? Not much, in my opinion. We've seen him in with plenty of reasonable names and blow them away in pretty quick fashion. The only one thing that we may learn is if he loses, and to be honest, that's not something that I can see happening. So I expect Conor Benn to get past Dobson in convincing fashion and move on to the next, and hopefully the next is a fight that we can have a bit more interest in over here.
Romani Mode is saying the way Dobson is talking in that promo material, considering himself the best in the world, is laughable. Apparently, he just hasn't been treated fairly in the rankings. Well, mate, stopped being inactive for years then. And they said they want Ben out in April again, supposedly against another unknown. How long will fans still care about Ben? And that's the point there that draws a bit of merit, because Conor Benn is a British fighter. He has to fight over in the UK right now because he can't get a license right now. The British Border Control won't license him as it stands, and that's in flux as they look to head towards a date where that will be in discussion. But they won't go another route. Maybe the PBA was potentially on the line there, but they haven't gone that route for now. They're going abroad. So he has to kind of fight there for now. And he's a British fighter, and I think they're accommodating to a degree to make sure that British fight fans can, if they have that interest in Ben, can watch him at a time which appeases them when usually fights happen over in the US. I know the US love it, but we don't, because we have to stay up till 3, 4 a.m. to watch fights. But that's been accommodated in the sense that British fight fans can watch him. And that kind of gives you the notion that they understand as well, too, that we've got to make a change here so that people in the UK don't lose sight of Conor Benn. People in the UK, from their perspective, talking a lot about Conor Benn and the drugs issues. What about the fighting sense? He's got to get the eyes and to see him in the ring, as opposed to just the discussion around him and outside of the ring. So they've obviously made that indication to change the times there, so fight fans, can watch him fight this weekend. But in terms of discussion of him as a fighter, look, I think he'll come through this fight against Pete Dobson. I know a couple of people in the industry are kind of looking at the upset, but I'm a little bit disappointed in terms of the opponent. Bearing in mind the likes of, the conversation that's been had, the likes of calling out and wanting to fight Mario Barrios, who's on the ascendancy, the David Avanesian fight, talk about David Avanesian, and no one knows David Avanesian, but no one knows Pete Dobson. So, how have we ended up here? Josh Taylor was someone who had a bit back and forth, I believe, with Conor Benn. Jaron Boots Ennis, someone who was talked about as well. Harry Scarf, British title holder. Could that be held for maybe the 5 versus 5? Harry Scarf last featuring on a Queensbury card. I believe it was the Magnificent 7 where he beat Echo Esselman. But those type of fights, which kind of bring the excitement, bring kind of the scope and on Conor Benn, are the fights that we want to see here. Obviously, the talk about Chris Eubank Jr. fighting, whether that happens later on this year as well too, if Ben can get that green light on it, is another thing just to discuss. But it does stand to be a little bit underwhelming as to the opposition that Conor Benn is fighting this weekend. What about potential fights this year for Ben, Josh? Are any of those names that I mentioned excite you? Do you think they'll revisit the Eubank Jr. fight? Kell Brook is someone that Conor Benn wants as well too. Are there any names that you really want to see Conor Benn in with this year?
I think Eubank Jr. is the one that captures the interest still. I think when you speak to people about Conor Benn, the name that they're always going to link him with until the fight happens is going to be Chris Eubank Jr. I mean, from a boxing fan's point of view, Jaron Ennis is a terrific fight, and one that would really capture the interest of boxing fans. But from a casual point of view, the only way forward really is that Eubank Jr. fight. And I think the commercial value that both of those fighters have got does make it a huge fight over here. And that's the thing, really. If that fight's going to happen, it's got to be over here. It's not really viable over in the US. It might be viable over in Saudi in terms of the money that they can offer, but in terms of the interest and the fans inside the arena, they're not going to get anywhere near the amount that they could get here. They're talking about obviously filling a stadium, whether that's down in Cardiff or at Wembley or at Tottenham. So that's the fight I want to see. I certainly don't want to see the Kell Brook fight. Been out of the ring a couple of years. I don't think it's particularly sensible for him to step back in the ring. I know he's talked about a fight with Chris Eubank Jr. as well, but that's not something I'd be particularly interested in seeing.
It's also as well, like, what weight is he going to settle down back at? Traditionally, he's been at welterweight, but his last fight out was at super welter. I believe this one's back at welterweight. But with the Eubank Jr. fight, they were looking at a catch weight there. So what direction is he going to? A welterweight usually traditionally ends up potentially at middleweight, so that might be in the future. But that doesn't seem still future middleweight. That seems still quite a while away, unless it's a big jump to that type of fight against Chris Eubank Jr. But it feels like he's got that juice in him left to fight at. And by juice, I don't mean that, but bad choice of words potentially. But it seems like he's got life, is a better word to use. It seems like he's still got life at welterweight. So does he want to stay here? Will he mix it back up at super welterweight as he did in his last fight? So those are kind of the discussions. Will the power hold? It didn't against Orozco, who was as well. Forget to mention as well, he ended up popping after that fight too as well. But does the Conor Benn attributes and assets, do they translate over to at higher divisions as well? He's got to kind of realize and go forward to stick at the division that he wants to, and it seems to be welterweight, but does that bring up different fights for him? Let's get to some discussion in the chat there on the Benn versus Dobson fight. We have here Jamal Love saying Benn will KO Dobson and Eddie and Gad will tell us he's ready for Crawford. Well, he's got to KO Dobson first, but I don't think any boxing fan will take that serious. Would they probably take a fight with Crawford? Sure, I imagine so. Why wouldn't they? But no boxing fan, although Eddie can sell ice to Eskimos and Conor does also promote himself well, I don't think they'll be buying that one. And with Conor not being a big welterweight, are they waiting for Boots to outgrow the division? Yeah, I mean, that seems to be potentially a call there, but they've also, it's one of those things where that might be happening, but they're also actively calling out, so attaching the name to them as the rise, and that kind of makes you want to go for that fight. And then also when Boots Ennis is apparently a free agent and Matchroom are looking to do a deal with him, does that make that fight closer? Is there negotiations going on behind the scenes? That's something that will play out in the future. But it seems like to some degree that might be a possibility, that fight happening. But he's got to get over the line. How much does Lee Wood weigh? Is Wood versus Benn viable? No, I don't think so. I think that's what's Lee at. Super feather now? So I don't think it's not a fight certainly I want to see either way. Lee Wood versus Conor Benn. I think I'd love to see Lee Wood versus the likes of Josh Warrington, versus the likes of Tony Sims, stablemate with Conor Benn, Joe Cordina. Those type of fights are the types of fights I'd like to see Lee Wood in with, not with Conor Benn as of now. But interesting off the field, left field indeed choice there. But that about wraps it up for this week's edition of the Seconds Out Live. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, Josh. Looking forward to being in Vegas. Looking forward to seeing Joshua Buatsi versus Dan Azeez. Looking forward to speaking to you guys on Seconds Out as well. Every week, Mondays, we go live, chopping up the boxing week and previewing and reviewing the fights of the previous and past weeks and the ones looking forward to the week forward. If you haven't already, click the like button, hit the subscribe button as well. Leave some comments in as well in the chat too. We do read them. A couple more comments have just jumped in, so I'll quickly read those. Fury is going to get battered, says JB Holmes. The more control they have over the fight being made, the less likely it's happen. Money Mode says, see you next week. Josh, normally what Danny does is he leaves me with the final word, but I'll leave the final word to yourself this week. What would you like to say to the people? What would you like to say about the fights going forward this weekend?
That's very kind of you, Ayman. So while you'll be flying over to sunny Vegas tomorrow, I'll be down in not so sunny South London with a bit of a preview, doing a media day with the likes of Liam Williams, Hamza Sharad, and Anthony Yard. So there'll be a busy day on the channel tomorrow. A busy week of boxing coming up with Joshua Buatsi and Dan Azeez, and of course Conor Benn making his return as well. So exciting week ahead, and I'm sure we'll see everybody again next Monday at 5 p.m.